I'm joined by Gabriel Gatehouse, creator and presenter of the Coming Storm podcast, which if you haven't listened to, I would urge you to do so, particularly at this point in time. He's also former international editor of Newsnight, and in a moment we'll hear from Sir Robin Niblett as well, former director and chief executive of Chatham House. Gabriel, first of all, great to have you on the programme. Has Donald Trump surrendered to an enemy here when it comes to Russia?
I think, I thought Claude Mallory was on the money, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, but presumably that's why you played the whole clip at such length. I think he is on the money. I think what we're hearing from Keir Starmer, I hope what we're hearing from Keir Starmer is his attempts to stave off any kind of increased malignant action from the Trump administration, while as quickly as possible building a stronger alliance with Europe, while in his mind, I hope he realizes that, of course, the United States cannot be an ally in the current circumstances. I mean, look, you can't square this circle, Sheila. Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said a few days ago, Washington's geopolitical priorities are now aligned with ours. Now, if that's not pure trolling, which I don't think it is, then you can't square this circle, right? You can't then also have Keir Starmer saying, well, our priorities are aligned with Washington's, because then our priorities would be aligned with Putin's, and we wouldn't have this.
And they're not. Yeah, they're clearly not. And it's worth reminding ourselves that since Keir Starmer responded to Ed Davey in that way on Monday, I think it was, since he said, I think you're wrong, they are still a reliable ally for us. And I guess if you zoom out from Ukraine, you could argue that's maybe what he was referring to there. But since then, we've had the pause on military support. We've had the pause in sharing intelligence. And I read now, and it hasn't been, as far as I can tell anyway, it hasn't yet been confirmed, a plan to deport any Ukrainians who came in 2022 to America for support and for temporary shelter, just deporting them all back to Ukraine. I mean, if that happens, that's pretty definitive, isn't it?
This is being reported by Reuters, which is obviously a very reputable news agency, and I've read the article. They're citing 4 or more sources. That the legal status of 100 and something thousand Ukrainian, or maybe it's more than that, Ukrainians will be revoked.
I think it's over 200,000, James.
It's over 200,000, yeah. Right. So, but this tells you another thing. Most of this that is going on in the Trump administration is aimed for internal consumption. It is aimed squarely at the MAGA base, saying, look what we're doing here. Immigration was this huge issue, and they are showing that nothing for them is sacred in the task of bringing those numbers down. And I think the whole issue of Ukraine, if you look at what Trump and the administration are basically saying, it's the Ukraine conflict is the root of all evil, right? It's the root of the deep state corruption. If you listen to some of the kind of weirder fringe elements in the MAGA sphere, it's the root of the cabal of pedophiles. The war in Ukraine was Joe Biden's attempt to hide his criminal empire. And what does it all go back to in the minds of this kind of fringe MAGA world that is now in charge? It all goes back to impeachment in 2019, right? So it all goes back to Trump. Everything is personal. Everything is personal, and that's what this is all about. It's not about geopolitics.
And can I ask you, one of the reasons I invited you on today was I listened to your podcast when it first came out, which is why you came to mind today. Can I ask you, in light of the MAGA world, the MAGA fringe as was, that you investigated for that podcast, where they came from, who they were, what they thought, was any of it sensible? Did any of it allude to, true issues in America? All of those questions that you asked. When you've seen how Trump has behaved, particularly on Ukraine, since he became president for the second time, are you just seeing the fruits of those people and their vote? Is that what we are looking at now?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I mean, the storm has come, I think, to kind of stretch the metaphor slightly.
Yes.
Um, you know, yes, there were the whole reason for investigating it was to find out where did this fringe movement come from that then led to the storming of the Capitol, which was still kind of fringe, but obviously so significant that it ended up in the Capitol.
Mm.
What we've got now, 4 years later, is back then we had the Trump administration and Trump himself kind of nodding and winking at QAnon and this idea of a cabal of satanic pedophiles because they didn't really know what it was, but they kind of figured it was helpful to them and they could nod and wink to it and nod and wink to white supremacy, but it was all sort of off the books, as it were. Now it's just this is Washington's position because the Trump administration is rapidly becoming a cult of personality. Your French senator and his court of Nero, I don't think he's far off there. It is a cult of personality. If you look at the sort of the way they're all bending the knee to Trump, and tripping over themselves to agree with him and outdo him in his kind of wilder statements, that is what is going on here. Now, I do think that this comes out of a place of genuine and reasonable worries, fears, dissatisfactions with the state of US democracy. Um, like it or not, whatever you think of him, Donald Trump represents change. The kind of change that, frankly, American voters have not had the opportunity of voting for, at least since Francis Fukuyama declared the end of history at the end of the Cold War.
This is the resumption of history, I guess.
Very much so. History's very bad.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I must leave it there, but thank you so much for joining me today. Gabriel Gatehouse, creator and presenter of the Coming Storm podcast.